So, chucking, probably one of the most common things I see people do is the little surface that you put on the bottom of your bowl. Now, I do a two-step when I do a tenon on the bottom of my bowl, but that little, it would be, if you're looking at the surface and thinking in a circle, convex versus concave. What happens with a concave, if you slightly cut in your tenon, trying to make a perfect 90-degree angle can be difficult, which is what your tenon actually wants, because you sit on the top of your jaws for your chuck. So if you make so that the edge, the face that your jaw sit on, slightly angles in or down, it's much easier to make than a perfect 90-degree angle. And what that does is it puts the meeting point of your jaws out here at the edge, the outside edge of your tenon, rather than the inside edge. If it slopes down, my diagram doesn't show too well on the screen. There's a little gap in there. In that movement pressure as you're turning, it can work the wood and your chuck jaws, potentially its movement. So it's a simple thing. Just cut your tenons slightly in to make a concave surface rather than convex. Can you see it? Yeah, it's a tough one to see.
Yeah, I could give you a pen if you wanted to put a mark on there, and then you could pass it around. Would you grab the pen on that clipboard, Jerry?
So they talked at the symposium about transfer of pressure.
Yep.
So if you're meeting towards the middle of the bowl on the chucks, then your torque or your pressure from turning
Yep.
is transferred directly into the tenon, and it's easier to snap it off.
Mark up
Is that what you're talking about?
where you want
Yeah.
the pressure.
So this surface, I'll put a mark in a couple spots here. This surface is what I'm talking about. And literally, if it angles in towards the center, it's good, because then you're going to be sitting on this outside edge. If it's slightly at an angle down, like this, what happens is it leaves a gap out here at the very edge. And that's where, as you put pressure up here, it actually loosens the bowl sitting in the chuck. So it's one of those simple things that it's an easy way to correct that problem. Or if you're trying to, I used to tell people, take a machinist's ruler and stick it in the corner and check for 90. But it's actually much easier to make it slightly concave. And it isn't 90 any longer, but you're actually sitting out here at the very edge. And it works.
Kelly, you said something like that, it was almost a throwaway, but you said you used a two-step. Can you explain what that means?
So rather than having my tenon here, right on the bottom of the bowl, I put this extra step up here. It allows me all kinds of design changes and what do I want as I come down. It also allows you that as you hollow, you've got a little extra wood down there. And if you go a little too deep, it allows you to change that bottom. Use your tenon as part of your bowl then. And change, as you take out this corner, you can change the shape of the bottom of your bowl or extend it a little bit. So.
That's the foot that you're talking about. The tenon's inside the chuck.
Potentially. Yeah. If you want it, but not necessarily, because some of my bowls I round and I don't have a foot.
I mean, in the construction process, it's basically a foot, and whether I'm going to keep a foot to the end or not is up in the air, right?
Well, it's a tenon until you take it off.
He's talking the two-step, right? So you have a tenon, then you have a
Right. Yeah. This added material is slightly, it's. I don't try to. At one point, they did tower jaws, and I bought right away. Grabbed some tower jaws. I'm making tenons 1.25 inches long. And the first club I joined, the Nina Club, Greg Coolbert was the president. And he goes, "It's an awful big chunk of wood you're leaving on the bottom of your bowl for drying." And it was like the light went off, and I went, oh, I hadn't even thought of it. But it really was a big chunk of wood that was left on there. And I stopped using them. So now if I use those jaws, it's just to get myself a little extra room out from the chuck. Mark?
I don't know, for me, I'm thinking the tendon is what the chuck is gonna grab on, and you're calling the next thing up a tendon also, which
Well, no, it's a shoulder that the tenon sits on, and that you reduce it, or you can either take it off or leave it on to use as a foot. Yeah, it's,
it's so confusing calling them both tendons. I don't know, to me,
it's a shoulder that the tenon sits on.
you're used to grabbing on the tendon with the chuck or going in that pocket and standing, inside. The two different options with chuck jaws.
Well, yeah, but I didn't discuss it in invert it. Yeah, so
How thick or deep do you recommend the tenon be?
that's personal preference. If you get catches while you're hollowing out the inside of your bowl, even on the outside, make a long tenon. Use, if you 1/2-inch jaws, you want it about 7/16. You don't want it to hit the bottom of your chuck, the inside on the bottom. Make it as long as you can, but I try to make my tenons actually very short, 1/8 inch.
Quarter inch or?
1/8 inch is plenty. If I tend to like dovetail tenons, but even the serrated jaws that want a straight tenon, you don't need to have a long tenon.
Depends on the type of wood too, I would imagine.
Yeah, that and things like sapwood isn't as strong as heartwood if you're tightening up. It crushes very easily. There was another point I was going to make. Gosh, I forget what it was now, but I know what it is. The diameter of your tenons. What they're telling everybody now is we used to make our tenons as big as you could. You get your chuck on, but then the corners of the jaws put dimples into that, and it crushed it. So then they're telling you make your tenons the size of the opening of the closed jaws. But I say if you're turning wet wood and you're going to make a twice-turn bowl, you got to make your tenon bigger, because that bowl's going to shrink. The distortion as you turn it away, because that's when you put it back on the lathe and return your bowl, you got to true up that tenon. So if you've now reduced it to the smallest size of your chuck, you don't have anything to turn away. So you got to make it a little bigger than that minimum size so you can turn away the distortion and the drying.
Okay, one of the presentations that I did at the symposium or attended was a guy named Jim Ector. He goes by the handle Spindle Jim. He's a professional turner. He's not a hobby turner, and he specializes in spindles and architectural work. And one of the things that I discovered, after I kind of reviewed what he was, going through, is that a skew that I had been using for a number of years, not very successfully, was ground at the wrong angle. I've been using Allen Lacer skews quite a bit, and I've had pretty good success with them. But this one has always given me fits, because when I looked at the handout that was available for Jim Ector's presentation, I discovered that the angle of the skew itself was way off on this thing. For some reason, the manufacturer of this had ground it to about 80 degrees, which almost makes it a square scraper. And Ector uses a compass, and he says to set them to 70 degrees. And when I set it to 70 degrees, it changed everything about the way that this skew performs. The bevel angle on this is set to about 25 degrees. And the rule of thumb is that you take the thickness of your skew, multiply it by 1.5, and that should be about the length of the bevel on your skew. This one's a little bit more than that, because that 25 degrees is going to give you a different length on the bevel depending on the thickness, of course, here. But that, I learned a lot in a very short time from his demonstration. And one of the things that he advocates is if you're going to learn to use a skew, you need to practice with it, and practice. What he suggested was go to the lumber yard and buy the worst quality 2x4 you can find, the ones that are like this that Menards sells, and cut them down the middle and turn them into a little turning square. And he does his about a foot long. I do mine a little bit shorter than that. He goes through a practice session every day before he starts his day's work. Okay.
Oh, so it's on.
Oh.
Push the green now.
Oh, all right. The first thing that he did, and people in the room were kind of taking cover, even though there was a screen there. He goes full speed.
Check the RPM, because there's one more belt before speed.
We're up to 1800. That should be fast enough. There are three cuts that you can do with a skew. One of them is a peeling cut. And the peeling cut is just to remove bulk stock. And the one thing I haven't been able to get used to doing yet is to tell if it's round yet by doing this. You see a lot of the spindle turners do this. They'll ride their hand. That feels a little funny to me. I don't like doing it, but we'll get it down so we're pretty close to round here. Yeah. Good point. Cleet pointed out that I'm turning above center, and somebody gets a demerit for not having their face shield on. The tool rest is right at center, so I'm coming in over the top to do the peeling cut. And then when you get down close to round, and this is pretty close, the next cut that you do is a planing cut. And planing cut, you're cutting on roughly this area. You stay below the center line of your bevel, of the edge. You stay below that towards the heel. The toe and the heel of the skew. You stay below that. Otherwise, if you let it creep up here, you're going to make threads, and they're not too nice threads. Get you a pretty nasty catch. But as long as you stay below that line and ride the bevel, you're going to be pretty safe. And then the third cut is a plunge cut, a V cut, and it simply goes like that. And then you can start to form things like beads and coves and so forth. And what he does as part of his practice routine, he'll go through and he'll do a whole series of V cuts. And then take a pencil and go about to the center point, and then you can start to roll beads. And as I said, there are 3 cuts. You've got, you know, the peeling cut, the planing cut, and the point cut. And rolling beads is nothing more than a planing cut. And so far, I haven't gotten a catch. Yeah. I'm using the heel. I could also use the toe. And you'll see a lot of guys, and I think I may have done it here by accident a minute ago, a lot of guys will use the toe on their planing cuts. And that works pretty well. It's actually a pretty fast way to take off material as long as you're riding the bevel and don't tilt it back, because if the heel catches while you're doing that planing cut, you get a really nasty catch that could tear the piece off the lathe. Okay. Any questions? Any comments? Anybody want to try this?
How many people have used the skew? How many people are definitely afraid of their skew?
I'm not afraid of it, I
Yeah.
just don't like it.
There's a sample piece that I did once I got my skew reground.
And pencil mark's a good idea. I like that.
It just gives you a target to go to. And the nice thing about this is really crap wood. This is part of a packing crate, I think. And you'll notice there's no sanding on that. If you work at this long enough, and Hector is an example of it, he does almost no sanding at all. And one of the products that he produces is spindles for spinning wheels. And that stuff, it has to be smooth, it has to be perfect, and he nails it perfect every time. He's really an interesting guy to watch. He does have a YouTube channel, so if you're browsing around YouTube, you got nothing else to do, he goes by Spindle Jim on YouTube.
Yeah, I will. How do you sharpen that? Do you use a grinder or do you use a flat?
Good question. You start with the grinder, of course, to get your initial bevel set up. But once you have the bevel set the way you want it, you don't go back to the grinder. You can keep them sharp by using a diamond stone, or a honing stone. They go by several different names. This is an Allen lacer stone, and I think lacers are like 600 grit. I don't remember, but the key to it is you get anchored against your relaxed muscle. That's what I call this now. And well, what else is it? And bring the stone up and tilt it back so that it closes on the cutting edge. And about 10 strokes, or a number of seconds, whatever you like, and then you flip it over and do the same thing on the other side. And most people say, well, that's all there is to it. No. There are two more steps to sharpening with a stone on the skew. On a square skew or a conventional skew, you do like so on the point, on the toe, and then on the heel. Why is that? Well, when I was doing the planing cut and the peeling cut and also the V-cut, that point on either side was actually my cutting edge. So I want to make sure that I give them a lap with the stone. It doesn't take very much, and it's a little awkward at first, but anchor it into your stomach and just keep an eye on where the bevel is. And you'll notice that over a period of time, and it doesn't take very long, the hollow that you get from grinding, because you are going to have a concave grind, the hollow that you get from grinding disappears. This one, I've only used this for a couple of days. I haven't had that much opportunity to hone it, but if I were to pass it around, and I can do that, if you take a look at it, you'll see where the diamond stone has taken off a little bit on the shaft and a little bit on the cutting tip, and that's really all you need. Be careful; it is sharp.
Is there guidance for when you use the heel and when you use the toe?
Yeah, there is, kind of. It really comes down to your experience and your comfort level. I like to use the toe. One of the reasons that I started thinking about this is that I found a project that I want to do for the craft show this fall. And it involves a lot of spindle turning, and I started out doing it with a spindle gouge, and I could build that project just fine that way, but the skew is so much faster to do. And I discovered that over a period of time, I was able to actually do the project faster by doing the rough cutting with the toe, the sharp point. But if you're not comfortable doing it that way, you go back and do the planing cut with the heel towards you. And if you go online to our club website, to the handouts section, there's I forget how many pages long it is. There's an article that Spindle Jim wrote that appeared in the Woodturner, the AAW journal, about 5 or 6 years ago, that details what we were talking about here. And he also talks about the angle of approach that you take to the wood, and that has a lot to do with how your skew is going to react during the cut. I like to do more of a shear cut because the shear cut to me takes off a smoother cut. But other people will actually approach it. Well, pretend this is a skew. What I've been doing is I've been going at about a 40 or 45 degree angle. Other people like to stay in closer to this. One of the things that's really important is make sure you're not doing this. The skew will get away from you, and it'll create some incredibly difficult results to fix. So, keep the handle in close to your body, into your stomach, and use your body to make the movements. I think that goes pretty much with everything in turning. The more you use your body to make the tool move, the better. But it's particularly so with a skew. Yes. No. I don't think you'd ever want to. Well, actually, yeah. But no, I wouldn't, because the skew is not designed for cross-grain turning. It's designed for turning with the grain, and I don't think I would ever attempt it. I'm sure people have tried, but that would be almost as dangerous as trying to use a spindle roughing gouge on a bowl. Not quite, but almost. Pete.
It's a lot easier to use the point when you're going over the end, and it's more of a steeper cut.
It is.
Because it doesn't block your view when you're trying to follow that edge.
It absolutely is correct. If you're using it with the heel down and the point up and you're going over an edge, it's a lot easier to reverse it with the point down, because otherwise you're going to get your view blocked. And one of the things that happens that sets off this spiral that rips your piece apart is you're watching the cutting edge, or trying to, and you're trying to ride the bevel, but you're not paying attention to where the point is or the heel. And what happens is it gets down so it's not supported, and it contacts the other side, for instance, of a V-cut, and the wood's coming this way, the point's coming like this, your cut is here, and bang, she comes back at you. And so you have to be very careful about making sure, and what Pete's suggesting, there's a good way to reduce or eliminate that problem, so you always have visual contact with where your cutting edge is.
Okay, bowl gouges. So actually, one of our club members was talking to me at the symposium, talking about bowl gouge grinds and things. So I thought we'd try to cover a little bit of that. There's a lot of different variations to grinds with the bowl gouge, and we'll try to talk about a few of those, because I think there's almost as many grinds as there are turners, to be honest with you. What's that? Yeah, the TJ grind, right? All right, want to hand me that bowl on the chuck? Thank you. And I brought some extra wood, and if anybody wants to try a couple of these, Ed's a big supporter of doing some hands-on, so feel free to stop later, like maybe when we're eating or something, and we can throw something on the lathe, and you can practice or try. So I had this in one of our previous demos, and this was put out by a guy called Turn a Wood Bowl, and he does a nice job. He's on YouTube. He probably has a site as well, or a Patreon account. But, I mean, these are some of the common names, and I think what you'll run into is like hybrids of all of them stuck together. But a 40-40 grind, a traditional grind, fingernail grind, a modified fingernail, which I don't claim to know what any of these are. When I did, let's see, what demo did we do where I tried to capture all the different grinds? But there was probably a 20-degree variation from different turners on a lot of the grinds. Some will do 60, some will do 40 on a bowl gouge, as an example. Ellsworth grind, and then a micro bevel. So those are some of the things. And then Jerry was kind enough, so I'm going to start here, but this is an actual Ellsworth grind ground by David himself. Yep. And so this is very authentic. It's even got his stamped signature on here. So anyways, that's here, and we'll put these out so you can check on them later. Let's see here. Here's a 40-40 grind. So if you take, let's see here. If you take the bowl gouge, the bevel is, actually I should turn that to 40. That would make sense, right? This is going to be close, not going to be exactly on. But if you take that bevel and you go down, that's 40. So you have your grinder set, your platform set at 40 degrees to your grinding wheel. And then you also have your platform on the angle, make a mark on there that's 40 degrees. When you go to grind, the flute that's down should be roughly parallel with the platform. You know, so your flute is kind of pointed away from you, and that's where you start. So you get your 40 on the edge, and then you roll it as you come down to center, and then go to the other side, go 40 degrees and roll it down. It's not real difficult to do, but if you want the facets to look real pretty, that'll take you a few tries to get that. But then I have one, and I do use it once in a while. And not as much as Batty uses his, obviously, but. I like it it does remove stock really good, and after, like if I'm turning the bottom of a bowl, once I establish the tenon and the shoulder, and I come down a little bit, I would use it after like the last 3/4 of the bowl, but it's tough to get into that corner with it if you're trying to do a push cut. But I'll cover some of that here in a minute too. This is kind of a traditional ground, and if you see it, I grind the heels off. It helps reduce the bruising in the bowl and helps you steer the gouge while you're inside. And this, I used one of these while we were at Utah, and it's traditional. And I don't know, maybe Kelly or somebody that's familiar with it. We were taught to use it kind of going up into a bowl a little bit where the wings can stay clear, but it did work really nice. It's nice for when the bowl is fairly open. It's nice for getting up into the bottom. What's your experience?
You've got a double kind of 60-degree bevel on it?
Yeah, it's about I think this is about a 60, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I don't, like you were saying, the sweat back wings, you're in at about 45, and that, you can use it more of almost horizontal.
Yeah.
It makes that transition from the sidewall to the bottom.
Yeah. And we were using it on platters. It was a little bit easier, like on an open bowl. It's got an application, and it was handy. And then let's see this was my version of the Ellsworth. So I actually used the Ellsworth jig, and I tried to copy once I saw the picture. But that's just a smaller gouge, the same as the one I showed you earlier. So I rounded this off just to kind of get past some of the steps, so we can talk about that a little bit. So if we're trying to put a tenon on here, so it's kind of interesting that 40/40 grind is actually kind of handy because the point of this is 40 degrees. It allows you to get into that tenon a little cleaner than a lot of the other bowl gouges, so you might be able to get real close. I typically always clean up my shoulder and my tenon with a spindle, a small spindle gouge. But let's see here. Yep. This is kind of a neat, if you get a chance to use this lathe, and if for no other reason today, just to play with this lathe, it's got some nice features. They're a little bit different, but you can set the RPM before you turn it on. So that's kind of nice. Or otherwise, most lathes will just have a digital readout, and it'll start out at like 50. I think most of them go down to about 50, and then it goes. So most of the time I probably turn most of my bowls between 7 and 900. And so again, the tip is a 40-degree grind, and so I should have brought my calipers, because now I don't remember how big I'm going to make this. In fact, I don't think I brought the chuck for it anyway. So this one will never go in a real chuck. What's that? Yeah, I'll just guess. We'll be close enough. And this happens to be some more of that green birch, which is nice turning wood. So I'm doing a push cut into the side grain, right? So the side grain orientation on here, and you're cutting this way. If you're pushing into it this way, you're going into side grain, end grain, side grain, end grain as it revolves, and that's a little harder cut. If you're cutting dry wood, it'll dull your edge quicker too. But then with this particular gouge now, once I flattened out this surface, I can just come in here with the 40/40 and I can get that really close to where I need it. What I would then normally do, like I said, is I would just grab a spindle gouge or a detail gouge and I'd clean this up. And like Kelly pointed out this morning, we would prefer that the outside edge is, get this as flat as you can, but the outside edge should actually be slightly prouder so that it's resting on your jaws, not the other way around, because if there's a gap on the outside, that'll allow you some movement in the chuck. So that would be the first cut. So now, oops, here goes my name. So I have a magnet inside, so now that has to go down here because my magnet slipped. Pretty soon it will be a belt name tag. So if you had the 40/40 grind, where did I put that? Right here. So the interesting thing is your bevel is determining how you're pointing it, right, and where it's going to go. So if it's 40 degrees, I have to have this way out over here as I'm entering the wood to cut the shoulder, versus if I had like a traditional grind, I can cut that same shoulder. I'm almost 90 degrees to my tool rest. I can come in here and I can cut that shoulder like that, right? So that I get a nice clean cut like this, and then I can transition to go around. The 40 degree, sometimes when you get your tool rest in certain positions, you know, your contact point is back further from your point, from the cutting edge. The contact point is further back because of the angle that you're forced to cut. But once I get past that, the 40/40 works really good. I'm going to just move this a little bit more. But you can see, like right now, can you kind of see that angle is a little bit exaggerated compared to like the cutting angle on a traditional grind. I have a little less angle on that. But the 40/40 grind it's good for cutting. It'll take a nice long cut, and it'll get through that very easily. Did I get you? I actually think you can get them all about the same. I mean, this feels nice and clean, but if I wanted a clean cut, then it's the same thing with all gouges. It's just a small cut and go slow, right? So if you had a smaller gouge too, you could take a smaller cut. But you know, you can come in here. I'm cutting unsupported as I get around this shoulder from the tenon, and then I get, I don't know, I think I have a little over 1/8 of an inch. That's a bad cut, and now I can finish this. Take nice wispy cuts, nice and slow. Move your body, not your arms. And so, you know, nice, soft, wispy shavings are what you're aiming for. And so that cut, I don't even think I have to sand that cut. Well, I would start with 6. You know, if you're not real comfortable, I'd start with 600 grit on this one. Well, yeah. So skip the sand. Just buff it. Then you don't have to worry about taking all that time to sand it. So, all right. Let's see here. So the same cut if you're using the traditional grind. Obviously, my tool is at a, I don't know, what would that be? Is that a steeper angle? And then I can keep my handle a little closer to my body as you're starting out on this edge. I don't think this one's as sharp as the 40-40. But it's the same thing. Move your body and then cut. And let's see, is this as nice and smooth? Oh, no, this isn't it. Batty is correct. Batty is correct. The 40-40 grind was smoother. So if you got to clean that up, there's multiple different cuts you can do, right? So if you have your bowl gouge ground with wings, then you can start doing some other cuts. So what I just did was a push cut. Another version would be the pull cut, right? I'm just going to get rid of that tenon. So the pull cut is just what it says. You're pulling it this way. And you're actually doing kind of a shear cut when you're doing a pull in this case. Yes. Yep. It's the wing is still making contact. The bevel is still making contact with the wood. And because right now I'm resting it on the bevel, and then you can just slowly turn it until it starts to grab. And I can pull that. And I'm running into cords and stuff down here, but I would keep stepping over to get that. Yeah, you would start out vertical, and then you're starting to rotate it until the edge will catch. Now it's basically the same cut as a shear cut. I would drop the handle more on a shear cut, so then you're getting a little bit, you're getting movement across the edge at an angle, a little more of an angle. Did you ever use a hand plane and you're planing the edge of a board? And you go straight and it pushes really hard, and then you turn it at like 30, 45 degrees, then you push it and it just starts peeling off nicely. That's kind of what you're doing here, is it instead of going straight at the wood, you're going to be peeling it at an angle. Yes, like a guillotine, right? So the difference here is I'm going to drop the handle a little bit more, and now the cutting edge is going to be going more vertical as it's touching the wood. And this is nice for cleaning up, getting rid of bumps and tool marks. Some funny grains too react better to a shear cut than they would some of the others.
I see a lot of people that almost put the wood facing the wood.
Yep, and that's a scrape then, right? That's a scrape because you're not supported. And so a lot of times when there is if there is like a foot on here, let's say that's my shoulder, and you can't get in here for a push cut, right? And you'll end up with this little ridge or something in there. So you can use like a little pull cut combination scrape to kind of get in there. And just touch that up. If you hit it nice and light with a sharp edge, you're not going to have a lot of sanding to do. But you can go either way, right? The other thing that I found out about, doing the scraping with like an Irish grind or an Ellsworth grind, if you have wild grain, sometimes I can take that scrape and I'll pull left to right, and then if you feel it and it's still a little fuzzy, if you just go right to left, sometimes that'll change. And if that doesn't work, sometimes you can push that scrape and get a little better result than when you pull it. And it all has to do with how the fibers are exposed on the edge of the bowl. So don't give up on trying to get rid of your tear out, because you can push it, you can pull it, and you can flip it over, and you could push it and pull it. And those combinations, all of a sudden you might say, hey, that one did it. So I can get around that edge, or I can get into that corner or something, because those are real nice to have in your cutting arsenal. And this, again, this is wet wood. About 80-90% of my turning is done on wet. Green wood. I would say almost 80% I go to finish thickness. Yep. Yeah.
And I'm just saying, experience I have, you tell me whether I'm right or not, is that even when you're turning twice, you don't necessarily follow the adage that you need what is it, an eighth of an inch per inch of thickness. You turn thinner rubber turn than most people. Is that true?
I don't know. I don't really think so. If I know I'm going to turn it twice, I try to follow that 10% rule. There's a lot of people that like round bowls, nice round bowls, and I get that. I do too. I mean, I just think it's less work if I can turn it all at once. What's that? Yeah, most of my 80% of them I don't worry about the warping of the bowl. But I actually spend a lot of time orienting the grain the way I want. This is unusual for me to turn a bowl that doesn't have the pith somehow symmetrically aligned with my cutting, because I like what happens when you turn a bowl and the grain patterns are symmetric. You can see left and right similar patterns, versus like the inside of this one, you can see it's a little more, this over here is almost quarter sawn, and then over on this side it looks more like a rift sawn. So you're more apt to see wider bands of grain and stuff, and that's fine. When they dry, though, those bowls will curve unevenly. Whereas if you can keep the grain matched down both sides and they warp, both sides will go in, or both ends will go out, or however that moves. All right, this is dry oak. And what I wanted to show with this one is, options for cleaning up like the inside.
Show us how you use the skew on the inside.
I just use the skew for pointing out my defects. Well, the lathe is stopped. I don't, yeah.
I use the skew to create
Right? So I'm just gonna check this out too. I had this off already, so Kelly was also talking about the size of the tenon, and I don't know if you're going to be able to see this right now. I don't think it's on here real tight, but that's what I try to do as well, is keep the gap short. I've kind of changed a little bit from, oversizing the tenon on the wet wood so that when it dries, you can re-true it and you still have something left. I'm using 2 different size chucks now. So I can hold it real close, you know, like anything from any gap in here is good, 1/16 of an inch, you know, up to maybe a quarter, 3/8, and you're going to get a lot of surface to surface contact, and you'll have a good tenon. And so I do have similarly sized jaws so that I can turn this particular bowl with this set of jaws, and then if it warps as it dries, I can tune it, I can true it up, and then just drop 1 step down on the different jaws, and that seems to work pretty good for me. I have on a couple of occasions before I had the extra jaws, I would leave it maybe not big enough, and then when it dried and I cleaned it all up and I put it in and I closed the jaws, you can still spin the bowl. It's like, oops. I haven't, but just, you know, one of the things I buy at Symposium was a set of long jaws, and those help do that. So the long jaws allows me to still get the wrench in here, right, and still get at the bowl when it's reversed. Because when you reverse the bowl on a traditional set of jaws, like even this one, I don't think I could get to the, I couldn't get the key in. Yeah. Oh, I see what you're saying. Just put them further out. Further out, yeah. Yeah. That's a good thing to do, yeah. The other thing I saw, and I should bring mine in maybe next fall, I think it was Glenn Lucas. I watched one of his videos, and so he took a faceplate and he mounted, like, you know, if you got a, let's say you have a 12-inch lathe, so it's an 11-inch disc on there. And then on that disc, he put 2 pieces of like rubber conveyor belt kind of stuff. So it was rubber, but it was like a 1/4 inch thick or more. And he put them on that. Can you swap cameras real quick? He covered his disc with those 2, but there was a gap in the middle. And almost always your bowls warp, and they're like the pith will be high. And so he aligns the pith down the middle, and because it's just a 1/4 inch high on both sides and it's soft, it holds it really good. He brings up the tailstock, and then he'll true up his tenon. And I was like, it worked good. And it does work good, but I've had to glue my rubber on 3 times so far because I haven't found a good way to keep it on. I tried double-face tape, I tried contact cement, and it doesn't want to, the rubber I'm using doesn't want to adhere real good to the, but it works good as long as I don't bump it while it's spinning, because I tend to hook that. Wood screw. Yep, there you go. All right, so I'm going to use the, we'll use the high wing traditional ground, and it's a fairly steep grind on here. I could probably check that out and tell you what it is. So this one is between 50 and 55 degrees. And so this is not necessarily the tool you would use up around the rim, but it's a good tool to use in the transition when you're down in here and you want to get to the bottom. So you could kind of call that a bottom feeder. What I use for a bottom feeder, and this was kind of a takeoff when we had Matt Monaco, thank you, Ed. So he had one that was really steep, and then on that sheet, they're calling it a micro bevel grind. So basically it's a real blunt tool. And it works really good, but it can get a little squirrely. And I forgot my handle. Yeah. So I would raise the tool rest a little bit for this. So this is ground, I think this one's like at 65 or 70. Yep, 65. Thank you. So you can get it, you can catch it up pretty high, and I'm still riding the bevel. And as long as you're taking light cuts, it's working pretty good. And I got the tool rest just a hair too high yet. Yeah, most of the heel is gone. I'll pass this one around as soon as I finish this cut. I like it. I use it a lot. And I've adjusted the angle a couple of times now. Initially, I think I had it steeper. And it was a little smaller. And the cut that I have right now is the one that's working the best for me. Yeah, I didn't go low enough on that, did I? So you want it to be, cutting right at the middle so that you could get rid of the bump in the bottom. And that's what I use that one for. So I only have one. I only sharpen it like once every 4 bowls. You want to pass that one around? It's cut on both ends so that. But as long as I'm thinking about it, this is the 40-40 grind. So if you watch how this is cutting, you go into your bowl with the 40-40 grind, it's steep enough that it can cut the walls really nice. And then as you get into the inside of your bowl, all of a sudden now I lose contact with the cutting edge, right? So that's what you can't do with the 40-40. So you need... Yes, yeah, there's a lot of tool out there because the same thing I was talking about before, it has to be at an angle to allow the bevel to glide or ride, and you will get a little more vibration versus something that's like 50-55. I'm starting here and I'm actually going. This is, I don't know. Let's just say this is like 80 degrees this way, and then by the time I hit 90 degrees, about halfway in. And by the time I finish the middle, it goes past 80 to maybe around 60 degrees. But you can finish the cut with a traditional grind. But the tool rest is, you could hear that chattering. I'm out over pretty far on that one as well. I'll probably just... And then right at the end, you can hear the chatter, and some of that is also related to cut end grain. Remember we talked about the end grain before? As you're finishing in the end, the cutting edge of your gouge is actually going right against the end grain as it's flipping around. And so that'll add a little bit of noise. Scraper? Yeah. Hey, I like that. Any more questions on bowl gouges? Nice segue. Cleat, thank you. All right, scrapers. And I know we've talked about these before as well, so I'll try not to drag it out too long. Ah. And I think I'm just going to put this down. Yeah, we're good. So I actually saw Batty do this at the symposium, and I was like, that's kind of a neat way to show it, right? So what Batty was doing in his booth when he was doing demos on the sales floor, he was talking about scrapers and how the burr is what's cutting with the scrapers. And he had it set up a little nicer than what I got right here, but he had this resting, and he just took his fingernail and he was able to hook the bevel just by dragging across it. I guess I put a burr on here, but I guess it's not tall enough. And this is heavy too. But he was able to go like this, and he was pulling the gouge, and he goes, that's the same action that's happening when you're starting to cut if you don't have it at the right point against the wood, right? So if it was totally horizontal and you got above center, then all of a sudden the wood's coming down into that burr, and it's going to grab it and pull it in. I'm like, interesting. If you have a negative rake, and this is probably and you're holding your tool horizontal, this bevel's going down. There's no way that it's not going to have enough grab to pull that in as easily. But there's ways to use it, right? So I think the traditional scraper has been used a long time, and so you set it up so that you're cutting at center, but you want to raise your handle. So you always want it to be cutting down, which in effect makes it a negative rake scraper. So if I'm looking, this one's just about right. And right now I think I'm cutting at center. To be safe, I'll actually raise my my tool rest just a little bit. And it's a little tiny black dot I got to align with another little tiny black dot. Where is it? There we go. Oh, the other thing too is, scraping can create a lot of vibration. So if you have the ability, and where did I do that little scraper? I had a little one here somewhere. If you have the ability, go with the heaviest one that you have, because you'll get a better cut with less vibration. And I could have swore I brought it with me. So this is actually a really nice scraper. It's got good steel, but I would promote. In all honesty, I've had really good luck. This was a Benjamin Best, and it's heavy metal, it's large mass, and it vibrates a lot less than the skinny ones. And I don't use a scraper, to make the bowl. I'm just using the scraper to clean it up. So something like this could be a really good option, and it's a lot less money than the high-grade steel ones. And it's real easy to just, touch it up, put a new burr on it, and I could probably still get 2-3 bowls out of one sharpening with the Benjamin's Best. So it's a nice option. This one's flat on the top. In the Benjamin Best, I actually put a micro bevel on. Let's see here, like right there. See that? And again, this one's flat. And also the thing I found is that most of the companies, a lot of them aren't putting a very good finish on them. So if you lap it on a couple of stones to get the cutting edge as smooth and shiny as possible, you'll be able to get a little nicer burr. So when you're doing a bowl, the grain is kind of running this way. So to cut supported, you know, from the inside, you'll get normally you'll get a cleaner cut if you're starting at the rim and you're going down into the middle, because all of your grain is stacked up appropriately. And then when you're doing the outside, it's from the skinny edge out to the rim. So those are normally going to give you the best results. So I'm just checking this for my center. I feel pretty comfortable that my handle's above the tool rest. And so then I would go down real light, take a couple of strokes, and then clean up the tool marks. The other thing with scrapers is try to find the curve that closely matches what you're cutting. So if you have a large sweeping bowl, then you want a larger curve. Obviously, if you have a smaller bowl or you're making little boxes or something, you know, get that arc to be close but just a little bit smaller, and you'll be happier with the results. And I got a crack in this bowl. That's the reason I brought it here, but if it wasn't for that crack, you know, it doesn't feel too bad. When you have a crack like that, the edge of the leading edge of the crack actually is unsupported. The fibers are unsupported, and so they bend over instead of being cut. And so then when you stop the lid, or obviously after you cut it, then they kind of pop back up again. So, I mean, what's that?
If that rim is not perfectly round, and you go out there with a scraper, you get in trouble real quick, right?
Yeah, yep. I left this bowl a little large intentionally. But yeah, so if I was doing this as a bowl project and I'm getting it thinner, I'll try to, if I'm going to use a scraper, I will use the scraper on that first half before I even cut the second half of the bowl out, just to be sure. But I try not to use a scraper at all on like the outside 1 inch. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out. But yeah. That'll change quick, and it'll get aggressive. Yep. So that's kind of it. Now, if you're cutting a box, like you're doing let's say an end grain box, you're really going to want to use a negative rake scraper to get down into that bottom, because then you're pushing your tool out over the tool rest, and you want to make sure that you're cutting that. Yep. You know, you're putting that tool way over the tool rest, running it in there, and you'll have a lot better results with that negative rake. It gives you a little more flexibility as far as the cutting position. Trying to think what else I wanted with a scraper. I know that Jerry's got, was that a Jordan scraper? It's kind of, and so the scraper has got it looks more like a large skew, and that actually is kind of a handy one to have. I don't have one of those with me, but we could simulate that with one of these others. And basically, what you're doing is you could do like a shear scrape with that. And you know, in theory, what it would be is holding. Can you swap cameras quick? And probably the outside works the cleanest, but you tip this off the tool rest so that you're just running the bottom edge, and then as the cutting edge hits the wood, it's coming at an angle, and it helps to clean that up nice and slowly on the outside edge, which you can't see with our cameras today, but that would work you don't have to do that. That would be the same thing, and so you could. Yeah, but you're not rubbing it like a skew. So I think you just have to hold it tight and then just hit it really light so that it can take off some wispy shavings. Because I'm not sure. Do you? Yeah, okay. Never on the inside and don't rub the bevel. Okay.
I had a couple of Sarvi or hollers, you got gooseneck and a straight one, and you got replaceable tips you can put,
A scraper disc on it?
yeah, for like howling, so you got the wrong,
Yep.
a flat one that's kind of egg-shaped, or
Sure.
one other, anyway. I use that flat one, and kind of match the curve, and it, yeah, okay, and so when you go in there, you can turn it, the straight one, you can turn at an angle.
Ah. So you're shear scraping inside with, yeah,
That's when the regular scraper doesn't work, then we'll
sure.
try that one.
Oh, nice.
Use that teardrop.
Yeah, so I think Sorby makes one of these in a straight version as well as the gooseneck. And I didn't bring the other bits, but there's a disc, or I should say a holder that allows you to have just like a little high-speed steel point. Yeah. And so that's for hollowing, you know, and then you have like an elliptical kind of one. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good idea. You can use those scrapers for that as well. So this is just something I wanted to show you if you're doing boxes or hollowing. This one works out pretty good to clean up your tool marks, because you know the tool marks, and I didn't have a good one to bring today. I just had this big one. Now this is one that I made, and I used a hex wrench as the cutter. But you would go in, and then you're cutting with the hex, or with the small cutter, which is probably the best thing to start with, because if you start using like the cupped carbide cutters, they can be really aggressive, and people will take out too much at a time. So these are a good one because you can control the amount that you're cutting on the inside of a vessel or a box. And yeah, yep. And then after you do that, then you would come in with something like this, which is a scraper, and then you can knock off all your high spots, and then you can have a relatively nice finish inside of your vessel or box or something. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, yep. So what Larry's saying is if I hold this, let's see here, maybe I think that's probably as good as that's pretty good. So if you rest it here and you're just in a little ways, which is kind of counterintuitive because we always say keep your cutter close to the tool rest for minimum vibration. But if you do that, all the torque is going to be on this edge, and it's going to want to twist it, pull it down. So what Larry's saying is you want to start your cut past this bend, because the cutter is designed to be in line with this tool shaft. And so this should always be in this position when you first contact the wood. Does that make sense? Thank you, Larry. Larry, how do you know that? How do you know all this stuff? Yep. So scrapers. This just had I don't even remember what I got. I think it's about a 65 degree is what I'm sharpening these to. It's not real critical as long as the heel of your scraper isn't contacting the wood when you're cutting it, right? So if you're doing smaller bowls, you got to make sure that the cutting edge is hitting your wood and it's not getting in the way. You could grind that away, or you could use a smaller scraper. But for this particular one, and I tried it with all of mine, I don't see a big reason to make all of my scrapers negative rake, but I just set the platform real shallow, and I put it on the on the grinding wheel, you know, probably about at that angle, and I just did a couple of small arcs. Got that down first, and then I went back and I ground the bottom bevel, and that's what gives you your burr. So, but yeah, I mean, I probably use a scraper on every bowl just to clean up, kind of thing. For me, it's more beneficial using the larger curves like this, because when I go in and I'm making my cut with a bowl gouge, I'll get a bump or two in here, and I'm not calling it a tool mark. I call it a bump. You know what I mean? So it's not the fact that I skipped or I moved my body and my tool kind of bumped in and out. It's that I'll have a nice curve, and then maybe I had to transition, and all of a sudden my bowl gouge takes a little shallower cut, and then it gets deeper again. And those are the things that I get the most benefit with my scrapers, is I can knock, I'll call it a hump versus a tool mark. I can clean those up a lot easier with the scrapers. All right, how are we doing for time? You had enough? Couple of nods. Yep. Sure. No, I don't think it matters a whole lot, to be honest with you. I think whatever you get used to will be fine. That's like the bowl gouges. There's not a right or a wrong bowl gouge, because whatever you start with and you get used to, you'll be happy with. So don't get hung up on that at all. 40-40. Oh, it's like a skew then, right? Yeah. Sure. Yeah, yeah. So this one right here is basically still have the factory bevel right from Robust. And you can see, I don't know, actually I can measure that. Where did I put that thing? I got my little bevel measurer. Nope. Okay, I'm just gonna, here it is, I found it. So Robust put this particular one at, I can't see with my, I think my bald head is still getting through this face shield. And the reflection says 20 degrees. There's a 20-degree bevel on the top there, and I know that the one that I do is less, so it's probably around 10 to 15. So the key is when it touches the wood, is it at a downward angle. So.
Carbide tools. I started with carbide. I tell you, the cutting of a traditional tool is much cleaner, but I still find that I do use my carbides for certain things. One of the things I talked to somebody today or last weekend at the symposium was about the how you present the tool to the wood. I kind of developed a bad habit or a good habit or whatever you want to call it of doing it a little differently than some of the professional turners. So this is a square carbide, right? I don't like the radius ones. I know that Kevin talked about the radius ones for his pen turning. I prefer the flat one. When you're using a carbide, you're at center. The plunge cuts I use directly straight, but when I'm doing a cut across the wood to clean it up, I angle my carbides. So what I'll show you is what happens with the two, right? So a plunge cut, cuts nice and clean. You get a nice edge. You get a nice finish, but you could do that all the way across, plunge cut all the way across the wood to clean up your wood. But when I need to do a much like a skew, I angle it. And it gives you much like a skew cut with that angle. Still pretty clean. These are pretty rough, fast cuts, so I'm not trying to get it real smooth or anything. The reason I do like my carbides is because of the resin work. These cuts I'm making is on wood right here, but normally I'm doing it on resin, and that's why it cuts better on resin. So I do have a piece of resin here if somebody wants to see that. But the other thing is the round scraper or the round carbide. These cut very much like scrapers versus peeling cuts, so they're a scraping cut. I do the same thing. I put it at an angle. Does it grab? No, it doesn't grab. It's still a scraper. So I can go into the straight cut, but the problem with the round cutter is if you go in straight, now you get more of a cove. So yes, I do, if I'm making a cove or if I'm making a rimmed access rim or something and I'm using so I do like the scraper for that, or the car. I say scraper all the time because these really are scraping tools, right? The other thing I brought was the cup tool that Tim talked about. I'll bring both out. This is a hunter tool. This looks like a regular scraper in there, but it's actually got a cupped lip. And this is a pretty aggressive tool, and it will take a lot of material out fairly quickly. And you can see it's already at an angle, so this is held flat. Tool rest is a little low. The shaft a little bit, yeah. I use these mostly with hollowing. There's, like I said, it's a little cup on there. And then again, this is another one that I made myself with a scraper cutter, and I put an angle. Here we go. You can see how that's angled down, right? So it's mounted on that angle. So again, you can hold it flat. And they just tend to cut better when there's an angle versus direct approach to them. Now, if we want to pop that resin on, I'll show you what the resin cuts look like. No. So you're talking about these corners here? Yep. Mine are pretty beat up, so they're already rounded over. I always take them to the grinder.
Do you?
So I did notice on hunter tools, this is a hunter tool, they are chamfered. All right. Resin's a little different animal than wood, right? There's no grain in resin, So, okay, I'm not going to be using that. Different size. I forgot about that. I don't know if we can get this on between centers or not because of this angle. Tim's chuck, I don't think he's got a small enough. Do you? Yeah, let's try that. That'll work.
Okay.
Man, I am butterfingers today. This is just a scrap piece of resin. Every time I pour resin, I have maybe a little bit too much I made up. So I have a little bottle that I throw it in, put it in my pot, cure it, put a cap on it after it's done. Next time I pour resin, I need more, I throw some more in it. I cap it to keep the dust and stuff out. Yeah. And then after it's all done, then you can either turn a bottle top out of it or whatever, bring it to the club meeting and throw it away. So I'm just going to support it a little bit there. We'll see how that goes. A little out of round. So again, this is where I take the cutter, and if you do a plunge cut, I'm going to move it closer.
That's a virgin chuck there too, so don't scratch it.
It's all out of adjustment, Tim.
That was another part of the, $10,000 I bought it. The symposium.
Yeah.
Are you saying that wet acrylic will adhere to dry acrylic? It bonds well?
Mine does, yes. So it depends on what resin you're using. Okay, so not all resins are the same. So what I use is more of a urethane resin, so it's aluminite slow. Regular resin or
You can put cold resin on top of something that's been dry
yes,
cured for a month
yes,
and it will adhere.
yep. It'll stick to resin as long as there's no dust or contaminants, and that's why I like the cap on my bottle. So I had that weird angle on the edge of that, so I'm just doing some plunge cuts. Oh, thank you. I forgot all about that. I'm just doing some plunge cuts to get rid of that angle. Now I crank it up, right? See, I'm getting these nice strings, almost like a peeling cut. I'm not saying it's a peeling cut. It's almost like a peeling cut. See, when it gets round, it really throws them nice.
That's pretty.
Anybody want to try?
Anybody want to take their first try at doing this?
You want to see what resin cuts like? Anybody want to feel what resin cuts like? Come on up, Paul. I know you want to try. Well, this does make a mess. I'll have to tell you that right now.
If you do that, you gotta clean up.
So again, we got a flat, straight, right? If you're going to make a plunge cut into it, right? You plunge right in, straight in.
If you want to make an angle cut, I angle it up and then just pull it. Let's see how he does. Just on. Right, that doesn't matter. So you want your tool a little higher, right? You're always going to be almost level. So that's a plunge cut straight in, right? A little higher. There you go. Now turn it. Now pull. You don't like that? Chatters too much? Yeah. All right, you can either lower the tool rest or raise your handle a little more. So it's not real round yet either, so. There you go.
Why is it chattering?
Why is it chattering? Because it's not round.
Oh.
So you're cutting here, but you're not cutting here. And that's just because it's the way it's chucked. So if you want to go back down, you want to go back down to this surface and angle it. Got a little better?
That's a lot better.
So once it gets to the round, right? Now you're getting all those strings. Keep going. Right on the same.
Right under the face now.
Okay. So you really don't have to face it if you're going to cross cut it. So now raise your handle a little bit. There you go. You want to try one of the round cutter?
What are we going to do with this now?
Same thing. Now if you want to make a plunge cut, right? There you go. You got a nice angle. Now just pull it towards it.
Oh, I like that when it wraps itself around.
Yeah, it's cool, huh? Mm.
Then you can't see it. Who else wants to try?
So, a lot of people will argue that traditional tools are the only way to go. I really like my carbides for when I'm doing resin, and I like them when I'm doing a hybrid, which is half resin, half wood.
Can you use traditional tools on the cup?
You can, but they have to be very sharp, and you have to. I mean, I haven't gotten the knack of it yet. So, yeah, really sharp. Now, like I said, the turner, the professional turner I saw at the symposium, he was always using a flat approach, even when he was shear cutting. I just find the angle approach gives me a better cut. Yeah. For resin? Yeah, it's. I don't think it's so much the hardness; it's the lack of grain orientation. That is, it's more of a solid, right? So you don't get the, you don't get the variation in softwood, hardwood. Even on one piece of wood, you get the different rings of growth. You can feel the different variations. You miss that with resin.